This idea that Archbishop Tutu talked about, that's a gift from Africa, a realization that a person is a person through others. That then tells me all the answers I was searching for. A part of my very existence has to be emerging through mentorship relationships, through those sponsorship and coaching relationships, because our destinies are interrelated. And the gifts that I have can complement the gifts you have. But the Western way of understanding leadership development is we have to compete against each other. This idea that Archbishop Tutu talked about, that's a gift from Africa, a realization that a person is a person through others. That then tells me all the answers I was searching for. A part of my very existence has to be emerging through mentorship relationships, through those sponsorship and coaching relationships, because our destinies are interrelated. And the gifts that I have can complement the gifts you have. But the Western way of understanding leadership development is we have to compete against each other.
Salutations, welcome, and thank you for joining us for the Pancakes from Scratch podcast. I'm here with another incredible guest and good friend, the Dr. Artika Tyner. It's so great to see you again. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Likewise, honored to be here and great to see you as always.
As always, I appreciate it. Now, we were just talking briefly before we got started. And this is what I'm hearing is behind you is one of a few libraries you have, but beyond that, you said you've written 35 books now. This is the 35th book.
Yes, I was working on the 35th book this morning, looking at women leading change in government. So I was doing some research from the Supreme Courts of who served in the president's cabinet and bringing all those details together.
Goodness, great. You got this thing down to a science.
Yes, I found my passion and what I love. So writing, I've always loved to write since I was a little girl. I just had to figure out over time what were the right vehicles. Like, for instance, and this is my first tip and advice I'd give anyone, find your passions and what aligns with you. I typically don't write fiction books. I like writing nonfiction because I've been reading nonfiction since I was young. And those nonfiction biographies were what really inspired me around my leadership. So people are wondering, they're like, how are you so effective at what you do? Do you sleep? I sleep well, but I wake up on the mission and my calling and I do what I do well. Notice I said that I do what I do well. I think the greatest challenge many people face, they're trying to be someone else and they're trying to follow somebody else's calling and blessing. God will bless you when you align with the gifts he's given you. So my gift, strength finder, all that good stuff already gives a revelation of who I am. My top 3 strengths are learner, input, and relational. That tells my whole story. Learner, I'm always trying to learn something new. So writing these biographies come to me naturally because I've already learned about so many of the people. Now I get a chance to share it. Input, I'm always looking for information and knowledge. That's why, I'm that lifeline. You call me, I can answer any question or get you in the right direction. And relational, I do this for the people because I'm a part of a community. And I realize as I'm especially focusing on Black unsung heroes and sheroes, I'm helping to elevate the story of Black genius and Black excellence in new and meaningful ways.
But how did you come to know yourself as well as you do? I think that's one of those things that there are a lot of us, especially Black folks in community, who are doing powerful work, and we're super invested in making things happen for the people around us and the community people we love. And I think many of us fail to explore in a meaningful way who we are. It's like, what was that process for you?
For me, that process was really a spiritual journey in the sense that I was blessed to have a mentor, Bishop Dr. Dorothy Blaylark Hill, both my pastor and my bishop for nearly 2 decades. And so when everybody rushed out on Sunday after church was done, I say, let me just clean up a little bit. Let me see what Bishop would like to drink. It's a cool little drink. I bring some in my purse just to bond with my bishop. I didn't have a position. I didn't have a title. I didn't have anything, but I knew the power of ancestral wisdom. So with that piece of wisdom, I oftentimes asked Bishop, there were things she revealed about me that I never knew, but that's because she was observing me and she understood the power of wisdom. So she would say things like, I wonder if you could help us understand this topic better. I'm like, what is she talking about? Of course, Bishop, I got you. Here's the notes. She was helping me to understand my gifts, like in real time. She was like, can you help us understand what Abraham was thinking at this point in history? Yes, because with input and learner, I remember once I read something, and I used to be as a child, and that's why we better be mindful of how we talk to children. As a child, people would say, oh, she's just strange. She's just a nerd. She's weird. But I didn't know God gave me a gift. I can read something once and remember it the rest of my life. I can tell you the page number, everything else. And I didn't understand the significance of that until I met somebody else who thought like me, Dr.
Mm.
Mahmoud El-Khadi. I was like, did he just
Oh
quote that
man.
whole speech? I can do that too. And then all of a sudden it was normalized. And it was something that was praised versus saying, oh, who is she over there? Is all she does is read books? Yes. And I'm good at that. And I'm good at writing them too. But I think a
Yeah.
part of what we have to do, and my mother said it growing up, but you don't listen. But she would always say, be the best original, be yourself. And I used to think, what are you talking about? I mean, I'm being bullied in school. I'm having some
Yeah.
challenges on trying to be myself. And you're giving me an invitation to be myself? It's like, mama, you don't make sense. But now as an adult, that idea of you understanding better by and by, if I would have spent more time, that's my only regret. I wish I would have spent more time understanding my gifts and using them no matter what anyone said.
Mm. Okay. 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 So you were blessed to have this mentor in your life, but beyond just the blessing of that person being present, there was also the action that you took to engage, right? You recognize the value that was there. So it's not just like, oh, I happen to have this person. No, no, no. No, there was work that went into developing a relationship and understanding that there's an opportunity here, not to just, know and be known by this person, but actually add value, receive value, and grow through the relationship. And I think that's a powerful piece. I don't want folks to miss on that because it's really there are too many of us who, when asked the question about like who are your mentors, we respond with, "Oh, I don't have any mentors," or I don't have any mentors or people in my life who I look at as mentors. Well, I think for a lot of people, it's just missed opportunity. Like what you're telling me, and that is like you don't recognize the value of the mentors that you have in your life yet. And that's not to say that you are you're not a bad person because you don't see the value yet. You just haven't recognized it. That's okay as long as you take action to start to pay attention and realize what's possible from the relationships that exist in the life that you have.
Yeah, they're right in
Uh,
front of us. But oftentimes, maybe even culturally, we don't look at it as mentorship. Maybe it's a community elder that we are seeking guidance from. Maybe it's peer to peer, because I've been in peer mentor groups as well. In one peer relationship, I didn't understand it at first. The individual said, well, I want you to teach me how to do public speaking. I'm like, public speaking? I don't know anything about public speaking. I just say what's on my mind. But I was sitting there leaning to the other person, like, help me to understand my legal skills. And they're like, you have all the legal skills. We were just going back and forth until we realized, why don't we just come in space together, ask what we each need and see how we can support each other and stop looking at, is it peer to peer, who has more experience, all those things that just really emerged last week during a lecture. I started talking about one of the lessons that I learned from living and working on the continent. I mean, a part of this ancestry of wisdom also came and going back and forth to Africa on a regular basis. I remember my first trip to South Africa in I want to say, actually it's 2007. 2007 was my first trip to the continent. And I remember one of the things that I was trying to explore was, what was the meaning of Ubuntu? I heard it, but until I stepped foot on the continent, I didn't understand it and internalize it. This idea that Archbishop Tutu talked about, that's a gift from Africa, a realization that a person is a person through others. That then tells me all the answers I was searching for. A part of my very existence has to be emerging through mentorship relationships, through those sponsorship and coaching relationships, because our destinies are interrelated. And the gifts that I have can complement the gifts you have. But the Western way of understanding leadership development is we have to compete against each other. But when this idea that Archbishop Tutu talked about, that's a gift from Africa, a realization that a person is a person through others. That then tells me all the answers I was searching for. A part of my very existence has to be emerging through mentorship relationships, through those sponsorship and coaching relationships, because our destinies are interrelated. And the gifts that I have can complement the gifts you have. But the Western way of understanding leadership development is we have to compete against each other. The added step of a wonderful mentor is not just saying, I see that gift in you. How do I cultivate that gift in you? Now, not all mentors can do that. And I think we have to hear that. The example that I think about is King David and Saul, right? King Saul is told that David, they're like that he heard him chanting, you slew thousands, David tens of thousands. A mentor should be shouting and praising and dancing, but Saul didn't understand mentorship. He thought it was about a competition. My mentees are supposed to go further, faster, because I'm sharing information and knowledge. And that's what people did for me. So when you see a reflection of me, you're seeing a reflection of my bishop. You're seeing a reflection of the person who invested in my education, Justice Alan Page and his wife, Mrs. Page. All those pieces come together, but we have to avail ourselves to the opportunity to find the essence of Ubuntu.
That's it. That's it. Exactly. I love it. I love it. Listen, so when you think about some of the challenges that you've had just growing into this career you've had, growing into the opportunity to create the things you've created, write the books you've written, is there a challenge or are there challenges that stick out to you as like the experience that helped to shape who you've become?
I would say those challenges are really about expectations. Dr. Benjamin E. Mays talked about it, that the greatest failure in life is not having that expectation of hope of what you really can be and who you are and what you bring to society. So I would say my greatest challenge was for my younger self, that expectation gap. Because then I would go into the workplace, go into evaluation after evaluation. Oh, you're amazing. You do such a good job. But there was always this but.
Every time.
Oh, you're a prolific writer. You're doing great work. But. You're an entrepreneur and you're skilled. But. And I think I learned over the years to bring my capacity down to meet those buts. Now, where I sit today, I don't even listen to them. Because I know then that my capacity and my capabilities, I don't even fully understand it yet. So when I'm thinking about who I am and anything that I would tell somebody else is the best advice, don't give into those buts, and don't get excited. Oftentimes people try to put me in a box. You're the first Black person to achieve this. You're the first woman to achieve this. All those accolades, they just get dusty on the shelf. What I need to make sure is that I'm not the last, and who I bring alongside me to create change and pull all those butts out of every profession, pull all those butts out of every opportunity and replace it to the possibility and potential of what we all can create. So removing those barriers.
That's heavy, because I think there's something addictive about that limelight. There's something addictive about the affirmation that comes with all these people who are giving you the accolades, the praise, the awards, the certificates, and all this. Where does the focus come from? How do you remain steadfast in recognizing the value of just staying focused on the goal?
I oftentimes think about Toni Morrison's quote in that sense of, how racism is a distraction. And it's saying that she's not saying racism doesn't exist. She's not saying that we have to fight, against injustices. She's telling you also it's the only thing that tells you next to nothing when we think about race. And what she's really saying, though, is to give an invitation to be focused on what you're seeking to accomplish. So as a civil rights attorney, I could oftentimes work on every issue. But for me, I say, well, if I'm going back to our cultural heritage, I have to ask myself, who do I work in community with and in partnership with? If you say education and criminal justice, I'm there. But somebody else says environmental justice, my heart is there, but let me move it to the person where that's their expertise. If you say, okay, let's work with gender justice, as long as it relates to education and criminal justice issues, I'm there. But if it goes into other dimensions, I have a friend or a colleague that can take on those pieces. So a part of me, my focus is on where we started. I had to first understand my strengths. What do I bring to the world? We all bring something. But if you can't figure that out, it's difficult to take the rest of the journey. We're like, you're stuck when you don't figure that piece out. What do I uniquely bring? We say it is a spiritual journey. We're fearfully and wonderfully made, but we have to internalize that and ask ourselves, what do we really bring? And for me in particular, I think about the Apostle Paul's words that God took the foolish things to confound the wise. As a first generation student coming from many adversity, no one would have picked me for their team of excellence. But when I think about taking the foolish things to confound the wise, oftentimes people don't see me coming. I love that. That's like the best part of my day. When people assume that I'm not ready or I won't understand, oh, those are the days that those are my best day. Because we ready. We're
That's it.
ready for y'all. Because they expect me not to be ready. I turn on their stereotypes and biases and make them eat their spit all the time. Those are my happiest days. So when I think about what we're doing and building the sense of equity and justice, those are actions and daily commitments. So when I think about how I position myself into this landscape of history, I'm one small blurb. I think that's the other thing that we have to understand, our mortality. I'm one small blurb in this journey, in this landscape called life. But the ripple effect is that the seeds that I planted, I won't live to see the harvest. But the harvest of justice and freedom, of economic liberation, all these pieces that are part of my work, I'm planting the seeds today, and I'm helping to find the people that'll water them, people that'll till the ground. So a part of what this also has to be is a living legacy where we're pouring out those gifts into other people, like what my bishop did for me. And we're helping to build a continuum around social change and social action. So that's what grounds me, and that's the focus. Because I've grappled with my mortality. I understood that a long time ago. I almost lost my life when I was a little girl in a high impact accident. I still got the reminder today. Only kids see it, though. It's very fascinating. Kids always say, like Humpty Dumpty, Dr. Tyner got a crack in her head. But adults, we don't even pay attention to each other. My closest friends probably don't even notice that. I have a scar that reminds me every day that life can go like this. And when I think about that, that is the motivation. The focus is on strike those blows against injustice while I'm here and equip others to continue to fight until justice and liberty and freedom are not words on paper that we live in.
So what's the grand vision for you in terms of how you contribute to equity and justice? You're writing all these books. You've got this body of work that comes together to form just a massive impact that you're having on community. You're traveling back and forth to the continent. What's the thing? What are you doing?
What am I doing? I'm helping us understand culture, history, and power. And the culture and history part, yes, I talk about a lot. We're coming on the heels of Black History Month. And the first thing I have to teach people is that Dr. Carter G. Woodson founded Black History Month, and make sure we make the connection of the how and why. And the people still send me messages. They're angry. Like it's the shortest month of the year. It was a slight to Black people. No. Dr. Carter G. Woodson chose February because two of his heroes were born during the month of February, Frederick Douglass and President Abraham Lincoln. That's how we got February. So I also have a responsibility to undo all those misconceptions about history and bring people together around, not my opinion, but the facts in front of us. So I have been known for that. When people think about who's the writer that's going to objectively tell the facts and help me work through it myself, that's the work that I do. So the grand vision is education for liberation.
Beautiful.
And it takes different forms. And I think the next form that it's going to take is to start a virtual learning academy. That way, because if I'm honest with myself, I can't physically be everywhere. I used to go, oh yeah, I'm gonna go to South Africa on Monday. And then by Wednesday, I'll be in Birmingham and be back in the lecture hall on Friday. And people are like, what? I don't know how I did it, by God's grace. But if I've been able to see the power of technology, we can use platforms like this, the podcast, we can use radio, we can create all these different vehicles to be able to share the message. But my overall theme, education for liberation.
Powerful. I love it. I love it, man. Okay. But how did you come to education for liberation? Where did you get that? Because you studied law, but was it always intentionally law for this impact that you're pursuing today?
I studied law because I'm from Rondo. And I think the second piece is I grew up during the peak of the war on drugs. Being from Rondo, you see the law impacted our lives and led to displacement. And for those that are not familiar, we had our own Black Wall Street right here in St. Paul, Minnesota, At its peak, over 400 Black-owned businesses. We had the vast majority of the community getting an anchor of wealth creation, owning our own homes. 1956 comes along with the Federal Interstate Act. I-94 goes through the heart of our community. The law, through eminent domain, led to people losing the hope of wealth creation for generations because they lost their homes. And I know you're like, eminent domain, they got paid. You know they got underpaid. So let's not go there. And so you see then the law as anchored as something that, for me, I always tell people that the law is a language of power. So even as a little girl, I knew I had to become well-versed in that language after seeing and understanding what happens to our community. The second piece was the war on drugs. Once again, that was all about law. Now we talk about how we can make sure that we have rehabilitation programs. We say that we don't want lengthy sentences. We're talking about legalizing different drug substances. We're talking about all these things. But when I was growing up, we weren't talking about any of those things. And we also didn't acknowledge, and I'm not going to condone drug use or drug sales, but we still had the same challenge that we had before the war on drugs. We do not, any city, USA, we do not have a strong Black ecosystem and economy. So we need to grapple with that. So all those pieces kind of drew me in because there is no way that somebody could even serve their sentence. And I'm not saying somebody, let's be honest, my own family members spent over 70 years incarcerated during the peak of the war on drugs. And so that displacement and what that meant for our family, I could do a whole lecture series on that alone. But all those things compelled me to be a lawyer. But the educator side was, I actually started my career wanting to become a high school English teacher, like my teacher, Mrs. Howe. There's a something about Mrs. Howe. She made literature come alive. She always smiled. I'll never forget. She always smiled. I was like, the day is not that great, Miss Howe. Stop smiling. But she always was smiling, introducing a book, and she just made it wasn't just about reading. She made it about how the pages of the book can help you process issues and help to build community, help raise awareness. So I had a different understanding of writing as advocacy and writing for justice from my experience. But then it was like, take a step further, bring all this together. It all just came crashing together as I went into prisons and started representing more folks and realizing that they learn how to read while in prison. That was kind of the anchor in the ship. That's when I started planning People Growing Justice. That's when I did all those other pieces. Because I'm like, how do we sit there just so patient and calm when 1 in 4 American children cannot read at grade level by 4th grade? If you can't read at grade level by 4th grade, you're 4 times more likely to drop out. And then if you drop out, you're 3.5 times more likely to be arrested in your lifetime. How can I just call this out and everybody's just comfortable with this? And so that was kind of what propelled the next phase of the work. I understood law. I understood writing for justice, but I also understood my role in helping to tear down some of the barriers and be really a literacy ambassador in meaningful ways. That was really a shift because I'm like, what a miscarriage of justice. I really think, and maybe this will be my seminal case, but how can you enter into a plea agreement or do anything else if you can't read? You wouldn't have knowledge of understanding what's even the charge or the indictment against you. So it's led me on a journey that I did not expect to go, but it impacts both law and education in meaningful ways.
Man, so we have to look for these moments of inspiration, right? What I'm hearing is like, as you move through life, you experience these things and you get exposure to new things, and it like everything comes together to move you in this direction. And as you go along, you start to like recognize what's driving this internal pull to like have an impact in a specific way. And then there's the decision, right? Like first there's the exposure, then there's the pull, then there's the decision. Like, oh, this is seeing all that I see, knowing all that I know, here's where I'm going, right? And I think we go a lot of time just with the exposure that we have, and we forget that we have to make a decision. Right? Like we forget, like, oh, it's like, well, I have what I have, I can do what I can do, and that's just gonna be it. Like, okay, but what's the decision that you're gonna make in terms of what it is that you intend to contribute to the world around you? How are you going to have an impact on this space? Recognizing that we are just a blur, right? You don't have a whole lot of time to be here. So while you're here, what's it gonna be? Because if you don't decide, somebody's going to decide for you.
Agreed.
And you can feel how you want to feel about it. The truth is going to remain.
This
So
is true.
here's a question I have for you. When you think about all the things you've had the opportunity to do and create and be, is there something that stands out to you as an experience that you're most grateful for?
I'm most grateful for 2016.
Mm,
2016 was the first time that I traveled to Ghana, and my life has never been the same. Ghana gave me a sense of purpose, of what impact looks like. And it also helped me to give the vision that I'm really working on now. Education for Liberation also has a component that I'm trying to formalize in my thinking and my research and everything that I'm doing, how to build Black ecosystems. So for culture, I'll just tell you the story that really, I was like, my heart is, Ghana's got my heart. I remember
okay.
walking down Oxford Street. And I was like, oh, I'll just get some snacks and I'll see. It's also an arts and culture district. So I was like, I'll buy some cultural artifacts and different things to take back home with me.
Okay.
And there was a man who said, where are you from? And I was like, oh, that's complex. And I'm thinking through, like, how do I answer this question for a man that's on the other side of the world? And then I
Mm,
also know, like, if I can't name where I'm from in Africa, will he see it as like disrespectful that I'm not acknowledging that? But yet I'm as American as the American pie. It was this, all these answers going through. And finally I answered. I said, Canada. I'm close to Canada. I'm in the Midwest, land full of snow. It's called Minnesota. You probably know New York, California. I'm just going on and on. But my ancestor came from Mississippi, and then they went from Alabama. And then finally he caught me mid-string. And he was like, sister, welcome home. And I'll never get
come
that.
on. Come
I was trying
on.
to, I was going to write him a whole dissertation about the transatlantic slave trade and everything. And all you see, a first message when you're, leaving the airport and arriving at that experience, the first message that you see at the slave castles and everything is Aquaba. There's welcome home. When President
Mm,
Akufo-Addo said that 2019 would be the year of return, he said, you had the invitation to come back home. And so when that, for me, it was like my soul said yes. Because although I'm from Rondo, I understand that. Although I can document my family history, I understand that. But it stops and ends with the transatlantic slave trade. I can't get past that. Beyond we're here, Mississippi, Alabama. But when that brother said, welcome home, it
yeah.
was like all those shackles on my mind on who I was and a lost child and motherless child and far from home. All
Oh,
those things like fell off me that day at Oxford. I'm like crying in the middle of the street. He's like, it's all right, sister, welcome home. I'm here, welcome home. And I think that experience in 2016 changed my life. I've since gone to Ghana, nearly 20 times now since 2016, because I
man.
never felt whole in that way. And I never felt that there was really a space where I could be celebrated in my Blackness until I arrived in Ghana.
So you were okay. So I know you're going back and forth. I believe for a couple reasons. You were bringing books back and forth to some schools there, and
I
then
was bringing books, yes.
are you still taking like groups of people?
Yes, I'm still doing that as well, because I was like, you got to share this abundance of experience. So everybody that's gone with me, I took the Rondo community elders. They still talk about the trip like it was yesterday from 2019. And so
Uh,
we're still hosting trips. And a part of it is for me, we also host a youth leadership summit to help bridge the gaps on understanding and knowledge about how the Black Star unites us no matter where we are. Because a simple fact, I don't think we fully understand as people of the African diaspora that we're 1.4 billion strong. End of story. I don't need to say anything else. Because if you think that you're just in isolation, you're just one fighting against systems of oppression, trying to find your way back home, you just get lost in yourself. But when you understand 1.4 billion strong, the fastest growing economies and populations are happening in the continent of Africa, when you know that, for instance, the United States has lost its space on being being the third most populous nation in the world. That's Nigeria now. When you realize that technology is emerging and people are building new possibilities of innovation second by second, you can't help but to want to be on the continent.
the stories that we're told, though, right? The narrative that comes across from a very, very young age, elementary, is all about the experience of slavery and then the poverty of the continent, right? That is ingrained in minds across the US, not just in Black children, but in all the students of the United States get this same narrative. It's slavery, and then there's poverty that's left after slavery. Like, how do we collectively open our minds to this reality that's so contradictory to that narrative that's been ingrained?
That's why I write the books. That's why I wrote Amazing Africa A to Z. That's why I wrote Ghana, a place I call home. And when I say that, when I served as editor, so I helped to write and shape that journey in that book that Monica Habia wrote. When I think about that, a part of changing the narrative is finding your platform and your vehicle for change. That's why I always tell the story wherever I am. I'm like, I'm a part of the Akwamu kingdom. Our king, Adenaho Oto III, tells us our story. He has his own museum that documents the story. That not only did the Akwamus actively resist slavery and fight against it, they took over a slave castle. No one tells you that story. Wherever they were in the world, they fought against slavery, to the point that many of them were repatriated and brought back home. They're like, we don't want these fighting people in our countries and tearing up and destroying slavery and fighting for their brothers and sisters. Why don't we tell that story? That our kingdom is known as being the conquerors of all conquerors, of the courage of the Akwamus, of fighting against slavery. A part of it is, if we're going to liberate our minds and go to this pathway of education for liberation, we have to search out the facts. We have to search out history. And that's what going back and forth has done for me. I can go to the University of Ghana and learn and relearn from people like Dr. Ayesu. I can go and unlearn everything that I learned, because it's not based upon facts. And it's also based upon a narrative to make you say, I have no connection to the continent. But name any other cultural group that does not connect to their country or continent of origin. It makes zero sense. So if we're talking about building an ecosystem, you can't help but to say that's by design.
Yeah. I think we have to recognize the design that exists there. We have to recognize also the opportunity that we have to explore and educate ourselves. It's too easy to get access to information now. It's too easy to get access to experiences now, virtually or in person. Like so many barriers are broken simply by the existence of the internet, right? And so there's just a massive opportunity for us to learn together, but also there's an opportunity for us to your point, build platforms to share insight and information so that folks aren't left without access to ideas, insights, and some exposure to the reality of what exists in these spaces that we just don't understand, or we've been, I guess, immersed in an understanding that's completely contradictory to what's true about where we come from. My goodness. Okay. So when you going back?
As soon as possible. I'm trying to leverage a trip kind of in between, because also Ghana has been named one of the book capitals of the world by UNESCO. So of course I want to go to all the book fairs. And that's what I mean. This idea of the authors, the illustrators, the artists, the cultural makers and bearers coming all in one space and creating. And let's be clear, if we're talking about history, and this is the part that I love, that's why I write, that's why I research. It's actually very interesting that this missing link of history is not discussed. That the civil rights leaders that we all praise understood the unity under the Black Star. We sit here today and we're celebrating Independence Day of Ghana, 66 years. That's our birthday. That's Independence Day. And what we need to know is, as a part of those celebrations, who are some of the people that came forth to work with Dr. Kwame Nkrumah? What were they trying to build? How about names like Dr. Martin Luther King? Nobody talks about that Dr. King went to Ghana and was connecting a civil rights movement to a global human rights movement. No one talks about the fact that Dr. Maya Angelou was there. In fact, she wrote a book about the history and culture of what she was learning. In addition, we don't talk about Malcolm X was there, Muhammad Ali. And we definitely don't talk about the fact that Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois was buried there. And he wrote there well into his 90s. And he was trying to finish a project that Dr. Kwame Nkrumah gave him called Africana, the encyclopedia of the African diaspora. That we can't help but to then understand that all these connections are related to what Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was trying to teach us. He told us one message: forwards ever, backwards never. We have to go forward in the mission. It's not like we have an option. Some of us think, oh, well, this is Dr. Tyner talking about is optional. No. It was by necessity. We have to tap into our gifts. If we don't owe it to ourselves, we owe it to the Black Star to unite. In addition to that, he also said, I'm not African because I was born in Africa. I'm Africa because Africa was born in me. What an invitation to all of us across the African diaspora. That consciousness around heritage, around purpose, it was born in us. We're just sojourning back home. So we just have to make it in our own minds to tear down the stereotypes that we have and the barriers. So I remember when people were signing up for the 2019 trip. Are you sure? Am I going to be safe? Will I get Ebola? Will I die? Everybody, you can go one by one and say, would you go back? They're already ready to go back. The only thing that stopped them was COVID because of the traveling restrictions. They're already ready to go back. One gentleman said, well, I love to golf. Will I have a chance to golf? I said, I can take you to the best golf course. Are you serious? He can attest. I took him to the best golf courses. Somebody else said, I love fashion. I was like, let me tell you something. I'll take you to the fashion designer that can make the cloth, can custom make your outfit. Really? Guess who's going back in 3 months? She is going back. Somebody else said, I collect arts. I said, I can take you to the artist of the artist. So it's that piece of liberating our mind and understanding a part of it, once again, is by design. And if the civil rights leaders understood that, and I hope that this is a message that everyone could take back, research, and study it. If they understood that the challenges facing the African diaspora were not, and Malcolm X talked about it best. He was like, you can't just say it's about what's happening in South Africa, what's happening here. It's just as important of what's happening in Mississippi because it has all the same challenge related to racism and oppression. And the power of it is we stand at one. And this is Dr. Maya Angelou from her poem, Grandmothers. I come forth as one, but I stand as 10,000. I can't help but to think that her time in Ghana helped her to understand that revelation.
Absolutely. There's something to be said about worldview and how things shift for you in terms of perspective when you get outside the U.S. The idea that Accra would be the book capital of the world. I'm sorry, what? You mean like the globe? How? Like that, like it, you have, and it's a small idea like that just cracks open your mind to the realization like, oh, the world outside the US, there's something there.
Yes. So I just say you're missing out. I can say, I built my own Wakanda. Oftentimes the students are like, are you going to bring us and sponsor us for education? We want to be in the US. I told them, unless there is a program, and no one's yet called me to date, unless there is a program we do not offer at the University of Ghana or at Ashesi or one of our other universities, I will never sponsor you to come to the United States. They said, why? Because I told them, you might be the answer to what we need as African Americans traveling back to the continent, of having a Wakanda where we can have the healthcare we need, where we can have access. Can you imagine? I don't think I ever ate healthy foods until I went to Ghana. I didn't even understand. I was like, that's what a banana is? And everyone's like, why are you so stuck on bananas? I was like, because I ate bananas all these years and I'm eating a banana from the tree that's about this big, very small, sweet, and the texture is like velvet. I never ate a banana before until I ate bananas when I was there. And then peanuts. They're like, why are you eating all the peanuts, Doc? Leave some for somebody else. I was like, because we got to add salt. We got to roast them over again, make them honey roasted. I'm eating them from the ground up, and they're amazing. Cashews. We got cashews. Chocolate. Never had chocolate. The world ships you chocolate from Ghana.
Yeah.
They add sugar. They add high fructose. They add colors. I'm eating pure chocolate. I never had chocolate before. Pineapples. I'm not even a fan of pineapples. And I was like, why is that pineapple so white? At first it's yellow, and I didn't know about all the additives. I ate that pineapple. I was like, my life just began. And then I'll tell you the last one, chickens. I remember in 2016, the first time I came, somebody said, Dr. Tyner needs a half chicken. I was like, I'm insulted. You are using a bias. Americans going to eat up the whole house. Dr. Tyner does not need a half chicken. How about a quarter? And they were like, no, doc, we really think a half. And I'm still like, no, a quarter. Don't try to insult me. I just need a leg and a thigh or something. They said, fine, have it your way. Got that plate. And I was like, give me the whole chicken. And they're like, we told you, Dr. Tyner, because the chicken there is pure. No steroids, no nothing. It's the size of a Cornish hen. Think about that. Our rotisserie chicken that we buy at Costco or Sam's is almost 10 times bigger than a chicken that's. So I lose weight. My doctor even asked me, she said, your health has dramatically improved since 2016. She said, how? I said, I went back home.
Come on. Stop. Oh man, stop playing.
She was like, how do you explain that? I said, I went home. I don't have to worry about the calories. I don't have to look at the labels, anything. I am eating the fresh fruits from the tree. I can go pick, I can go do whatever I want. I'm going home.
Listen, you're going to have me dig up my passport. Wait a minute.
I'm going home. She was like, how do you explain that? She was like, you don't seem as stressed. I was like, because I'm going home.
That's it.
And it matters.
Goodness gracious. And the thing is, food has such a huge impact on culture. It's actually is one of the main things. So pancakes from scratch, right? Like the whole idea was around the way that there's some intersection between food and culture and ambition, right? When we think about what it is we strive for, it has something to do with how we're raised in the community that we grow in, and that it's heavily impacted by how we eat, what we eat, and how our community breaks bread together, right? And so I'm still exploring, I'm still trying to understand it, but I think there's a lot of power in that. So all that to say, for you, is there a food like I know you're getting exposed to all the real foods back home, but is there a food that you grew up with that's like this was my favorite food, this is my favorite meal as a kid?
Anything with sweet potatoes. I mean, sweet potatoes. And you say sweet potato pie, it's like game over. Mother used to be like, get out the kitchen. You gotta share everybody else. Who's everybody else? I forgot I had siblings when she made sweet potato pie. Like, hands down, sweet potatoes. And it's beautiful then going back home too. You see all the different variations of yams and how they're prepared and how they cook. So that expanded my mind now. Sometimes you eat ground yams. Sometimes, you're adding and you're eating it more. Like for me, it was always related to desserts. But when I went back home, I was like, it's like the vegetable, it's a side dish. It can be used in different ways to substitute the traditional starch that we would eat. So hands down for me, it's sweet potatoes.
I love it. That's all right, man. Let me find out. And I'm like, I just recently started getting exposure to like different colored, again, like the purple potatoes and all. Like I was like, oh wait, what is this? And so it's for me, not having been back to the continent to like start getting exposed just because I went to Sprouts, right? Like that's how I found out. But there's some opportunity for exposure there. And I think it's beautiful that you are really leaning into creating these opportunities for folks to expand their worldview, get access to see the continent, get access to like engage and participate in the culture there, and like recognize the opportunity that exists to connect the diaspora in a real and meaningful way. I think it's super powerful, and I really appreciate all of the energy and effort that you put into making that stuff happen.
Oh, I love it. It's one of those gifts that you just had to share. If that experience transformed my life, I can't help but to have expectations for others.
I love it. Well, listen, I'm looking forward to being involved in one of these trips you got coming up. We're gonna have to have a conversation about that offline because at this point I'm like, yeah, there's no way we don't make it happen. Okay, so yeah.
Of course.
Dr. Tyner, thank you so much for making time. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Honored to be here. And here we go again. We'll keep fighting for it, but education for liberation.
That's it. That's it. Well, you keep doing your thing, and I'll keep doing mine, and I'll talk to you soon. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, indeed.